Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's uLaw webinar. It's a special webinar for us here at uLawPractice as we're co-hosting this with Global Payments, a financial technology company, a conglomerate, and a very established firm. And we, of course, feel very proud to be partnering with Global Payments to offer ease of payments in terms of processing trust and general related payments that, as you know, that a legal firm has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Today's webinar is going to specifically focus on the payment integration features and functionalities and how that best serves your legal firm. We're going to definitely throw light on the benefits of working with a company such as Global Payments, their global reach, and the opportunity for you as a legal firm, either currently using uLawPractice or exploring to use uLawPractice, the benefits that you would see through this integration with Global Payments to process, accept, and transact financial transactions, both for trust and for general related payments in a very smooth and, more importantly, compliant manner. Today's webinar is not accredited for any CPD credits. Just wanting to ensure that you're aware of that. We do have our CPD session scheduled for next Friday for sure. Today's webinar will be recorded and be available to you on our YouTube channel as early as Monday next week. Okay? Well, like every other uLaw webinar, today's webinar has a specific agenda, and it takes me great pleasure to, in fact, introduce Daniel Wolfson with Global Payments, who's joined us today for this webinar. Dan, you there?
Hi, Praveen. I am here. Thank you.
Fantastic. So Daniel Wolfson is our go-to person at Global Payments. He's actively working with our current clients to give them information about the integration, information about Global Payments, and also ensuring that he acts as their first point of contact for things that you need to get done, not only with the integration, but for the relationship that you would then hold with Global Payments. So truly, he's been a great partner, and we've got some wonderful feedback from our clients who will work with Dan. So, Dan, thank you so much for making it. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
So if we were to segue this webinar, I'm going to take a back seat. Really, I'd love for you, Dan, if you want to take that presentation. I'm going to pass the presenter role to you. If you can explain to the audience more about Global Payments, what you're seeing out there in the marketplace, and talk a little bit about the integration and what that service offers legal professionals, and then we'll go from there.
For sure.
And I'm just going to pass this role to you. And hopefully this works. It sure does.
And hopefully you now see a Why Choose Global Payments and uLaw screen.
I do.
Excellent. Okay, so that means it's being shared. Fantastic. So we're going to tell you a little bit more about payments and what kind of forms of payments we can accept. Much of this will be reviewed. We'll then talk a little bit about why Global Payments and who Global Payments is, how we can then increase cash flow through Global Payments and uLaw integration, and then I'll hand it back to Praveen for a live demo. So forms of payment, as we all know, people can accept cash, check, electronic funds transfer, and credit cards. And by no means do we want to replace any form of payment that you might be accepting now. However, we want to expand on the use of credit cards in time. Forms of payment, as we're all aware of, the Law Society does allow cash transactions. However, it does limit it to a $7,500 maximum on the retainer. So what happens if you charge a retainer that is significantly more than $7,500? There are KYC, Know Your Client, and anti-money laundering rules and legislation that we have to all abide by. So it makes it more challenging to deal with high-ticket items in that market. Many people will accept checks. There can be a time delay from when you deposit that check and when the funds are available. And in some cases, what happens if the check does not clear? Alternatively, there's an EFT or electronic funds transfer, which is usually available through your bank. It's pretty near immediate. The client goes on their cell phone, emails you, or transfers money. We find that is less popular for high-ticket items and it requires significant cash on hand. So we all know that the use of cash, while still popular, is decreasing. And if you ever walk into a coffee shop and they take cash only, what happens? And a good example is up in Ennismore area. I walked into a coffee shop on summer vacation. I very rarely carried cash anymore. I was about to spend some money at their coffee shop, said cash only, said, sorry, they lost out on a potential sale. So while we see the cash is still common, we know that the cash is decreasing. And higher ticket items are usually paid with credit cards. If you can imagine, if you're walking into Costco, the vast majority of payments at Costco or Superstore or places of those natures, even Best Buy, usually done on credit cards. This was, I just added this slide. This is actually shows the use of cash, credit, and EFT. This is taken from Payments Canada. In that 2002, 40% of all transactions were cash related. And 2017, less than 30% were cash related. EFT, which is a popular form of payment, in 2012 was at 11% of all payments, and 2017, 12.6%, definitely increasing. Credit cards, if we look at here, checks and paper forms of payment were 5% in 2012 and have dropped to 3.4% in 2017. So while we still might accept checks, they're not becoming a very popular form of payment. Lastly, credit cards in 2012 were at 18.5% and in 22%, almost 23% in 2017. So the use of credit cards in all markets is increasing. So we like to say, how do your clients want to pay? And do you want to provide them with a method of their choice on any device at any time to provide what we call a frictionless payments experience? Friction is what we define as the hassle factor in payment. Some are uncomfortable asking for payment or pointing this, very cumbersome point of sale device towards their customer. Here with uLaw, you'll have a very simple ability to generate an invoice or a matter and attach that payment functionality directly to that invoice, decreasing that friction, increasing that sales, increasing that traction, and uptake from the customer. So what might happen to your practice if you let your clients know that you take Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Diners Club, JCB, which is a Japanese commercial bank, Discover, or UnionPay, in addition to other forms of payment that you might already be taking, cash, EFT, and checks. What we see in other practices is that their business increase because you're allowing people to pay with the methods that they want to be able to pay in. Why Global Payments? Global Payments is a leading payment technology services company. We have approximately 2.5 million customer locations all over the globe. We're active in at least 30 countries. We have 8,500 employees worldwide. We process, on average, about $550 billion a year and over 11 billion unique transactions. So we have the payment space pretty much figured out at this point. We are a leader in Canada. We've been operating in Canada consecutively for 50 years. We're the largest independent non-bank-owned acquirer in Canada. We are our own sponsor bank, and we are a federally regulated financial institution, GPC-FC Financial Corporation. We are a direct member with all major payment networks. We're bank neutral and can deposit funds into any bank. We have regional offices across Canada. We have aligned account management for all merchant clients, the broadest product suite of any acquirer in the marketplace, and the largest, most comprehensive customer support infrastructure. We want to get paid faster. The easiest way to do that is we're going to create a matter in uLaw, send the matter or the invoice to the client. The client enters the credit card information into the secure URL, and funds are deposited next day. So the question is, who wants to get paid faster? It easily reconciles with uLaw, and we often get asked this question that how do funds, are they deposited into trust or general accounts? We do both. Once you create a matter in uLaw, you direct whether it's a trust matter or a general matter. We will deposit funds into your trust or your general account. Because we have to remain compliant with Law Society rules around trust accounting, we are going to deposit that gross dollar amount into that trust account. Let's say, for example, you do a $500 retainer, and that has to go into your trust account. You send out the matter, you take payment. The next day, you would receive $500 directly into the trust account. Just one second, if someone would like to join in. After that, the banking fees are deducted from the general account once per month. So any amount that's deposited into the trust account is deposited directly into the trust, and all banking fees are deducted at the end of the month. So it remains fully compliant with the Law Society rules around trust accounting. Does anybody have any questions on that?
So kindly do use the chat window at any time if you have any specific questions that you want to ask us with regards to global payments or the integration itself. But one important point you mentioned, Dan, earlier on, that you went to that coffee shop, they only accepted cash. I think it's important to note that you, of course, walked into another coffee shop where they did accept credit cards. Or
Correct. And in professional services, very good example. I had an accountant, did great work, and I wanted to pay my accountant. And he sent me a bill, and I said, oh, how can I pay my bill? Well, EFT or check. I'm like, well, I don't really want to put a check in the mail because I don't know if it'll get there. And EFT I don't really like using. And he kept chasing me for payment. So there was a large delay between when he delivered his service and when I eventually paid him. Not because I didn't want to pay him, but because it was a hassle factor, and I found it inconvenient for me to pay his bill, which was really bad on my part because he provided great work. So then we said, hey, would you want the ability to accept credit cards? Yes. Then he offered that to me. Great. I was able to then pay in a manner that I, as a client, liked. And his advantage was that he now has the decreased ability or decreased AR, accounts receivable time, which sometimes we see in the legal profession. You can imagine that while you do great work for a client may not pay immediately. There can be cases in the legal profession where account may go 5, 10, 15, sometimes even 30 days, and it delays that accounts receivable cycle. So here, by using uLaw in our integrated system, it dramatically reduces your accounts receivable time to pretty much seconds, if not a day.
Absolutely. I certainly see that as a great value addition, especially if you look at the sole practitioners and the smaller, medium-sized businesses that enter in the legal business. And that really seems to be the trend here in Canada. So I think that's a great point, is to be able to have better control over your accounts receivable, also have better visibility and faster ways of accepting that payment.
Exactly. And really, it's, pardon the pun here, but having an integrated system is going to increase your ability to increase your own cash flow and run your practice and allow you to practice law, as opposed to chasing your clients and having that delayed accounts receivable time.
Now, it was an interesting point that you had in your previous slide. I know you and I spoke about it, which is, I think, one of the bigger value additions that Global Payments does offer uLaw customers, and that was just a single bill at the end of the month. I thought that was very interesting.
Yes. So what happens in many situations is that some providers that might work there might actually then deposit what we call the net fees into the account. So let's say you do a $1,000 transaction or a $1,000 matter. Some providers will take that $1,000, deduct their fees, let's call that 3%. So you're left with $970, and then deposit that into your trust account. That makes reconciliation challenging.
A nightmare.
And it's also a nightmare, to be honest. And then from a compliance point of view, it puts you, the legal professional, slightly offside, because what you should be showing in the account is $1,000, not $970. So our ability is our system is set up so that we can accommodate both. You can have a trust account and a general account. We set it up so that the trust account is for deposit only. We cannot actually take money out of the account because it's a deposit only account. There's a general account, which we also set up at the same time, is designed for deposits and withdrawals. So by the nature of how we set it up, we can only deposit into the trust account, bringing you back on side with back inside from a compliance point of view, and so you're having an easier time of reconciling that transaction and moving forward dealing with the Law Society and their accounting requirements as well. Does that answer a question? Does anybody else listening in have a question they'd like addressed before we go on?
I think we had a question via email right here, and I think you had alluded to that briefly as to what the cost of the service is.
Excellent.
And I know that's kind of your segue.
Okay. So we have an exclusive offer for uLaw clients. We know that many of legal professionals are often starting off their practice, so we've waived all of our setup and monthly fees, which saves you, the professional, about $1,717 for the first year. We offer, so there's no term. It's a flat rate of 2.95% on all domestic cards and 1% for cross-border and international cards. And there are card brand fees and assessments that do apply. So there's no setup fees and no monthly fees for the first year. That allows people, especially if they're just starting off in the process, to ramp it up. And what we find that the lawyers and legal professionals that we are using it really have a very positive experience with it.
Absolutely. So this gives the sole practitioner the visibility of almost a flat rate appreciation of what the final charges would be for a transaction, right? Rather than, I think you guys have done really well. I think this is a newer improvement,
sure.
Maybe with the bigger uptake that we're having with customers.
We found that the most successful method with legal professionals is that they prefer to know that each transaction is roughly going to cost them 3%. They found that it's easy because then they can build in their costs and their fees and their times, and it saves them the hassle of having to go through their merchant statement at the end of the month and saying, well, what's the fee for this card and what's the fee for that card? So with flat rate billing, it's actually very, very popular. And with that flat rate billing, we're also able to waive our monthly fees and our setup charges as well. So you can start using the system, very easy to set up, and if it doesn't work for you, I hate to say it, but you can certainly cancel without any penalty as well. We also provide an online an online portal and e-statements as well, so you'd know what transactions have transpired, if you need to reconcile them, or if there's any issues on the account.
So basically, they could just create a category called Global Payments Fees within uLaw.
Yes. And
you have a single number to deal with for that month.
Exactly.
Makes the general reconciliation that much more simpler.
Exactly. And any banking fees that you do pay from your general account are a tax-deductible business-related expense.
Exactly. But do you also split it up as to whether the person pays through a different credit card? Because sometimes our customers are like, I really don't remember what that transaction is. But they do have a record of it being a Visa card or a MasterCard.
with the tools that we provide you, if you do have challenges of reconciliation, in addition to reconciling in uLaw, we do provide our clients with what we call our merchant portal, where they can see a summary of all their transactions, the day that they were incurred, the time that they were incurred, the card that was used, although it is tokenized, but it still can be cross-referenced very easily.
That's fantastic.
So again, a flat rate of 2.95% on all domestic cards, 1% for cross-border international cards, and there's absolutely no setup or monthly fees, saving you, the legal professional, about $717 over the first year. And then lastly, I'm going to hand that back to Praveen so he can run a live demo of how the system actually generates a matter and sends out an invoice. And before I put myself back on mute, are there any questions that people might want to have addressed before we move on?
We'll maybe leave a pause for the audience to maybe use the chat window to ask any questions, or you can just email us at support@uLawPractice.com or text us right from the app.
And for those of you that would like to answer a question, there's if you look at the top of the screen, there's going to be a phone icon, a little chat icon, a share screen icon, and if you go to the chat section, you can easily type in your question there.
And we will be both emailing and as well providing you with Dan's email address if you do need to follow up and ask further questions.
And
I'm just waiting as someone's typing a question. Now, one popular question that we've had from our existing clients who have integrated with global payments is, or at least have explored it, have tried some other options, is the ease of creating your trust and general accounts. So I know your response times has been less than maybe 2 to 3 days in terms of helping clients set it up. So is that because you're more globally present or more exclusively present in Canada, or is that because you're already you mentioned you're all back yourself?
Excellent question. So whenever we're working with a new client, we send them what we call a business information form, and that basically contains the tombstone information, all the information necessary to do the pre-application. Then we all ask for a copy of 2 void checks at the same time. One void check is for your general account. One is then for the trust account. We then pre-populate the merchant agreement with all that tombstone information and the banking information, which we're then legally required to do. We send that to you, the client, for electronic signature, and then we board the account. Boarding takes roughly 1 to 2 days, and so we're generally up and running within a maximum time frame of about 2 to 3 days. As we are a financial institution, there is some due diligence work on our end to make sure that the account is valid, such as banking validation and making sure the bank information is correct, but we take care of all that behind the scenes.
That's fantastic. I think that's the first time I've heard someone literally demystify that whole process of connecting between banks, because I think that really makes it simpler for us to make it easier on our clients.
We do try to make it as easy as possible and as simple as possible to board and get you up and running.
Fantastic. I think we got a question, and this is again regarding the price itself. So maybe they just joined a little bit late. So if you want to just go back to that slide. So what global payments are offering exclusively to uLaw clients is close to be a flat rate of 2.95%. So if you're getting a $1,000 retainer or payment, assume the 3%, as Dan mentioned, the $30 is the fee that you're paying for the convenience, the cost effectiveness of, looking at the total ownership of that transaction.
Exactly. Praveen, thank you again. With credit card transactions, again, the value the value of that service is that you get your funds and get paid the next day. That's the value. So as we talked about earlier, your AR cycle or your day sales outstanding can go from sometimes weeks or months to the next day. We find that with legal professionals who are using this service, they find that they have a 90% uptake in payment within minutes of sending out their payment link or their matter. So we know that it works. We know that it's going to decrease your AR time. And on the downside, unfortunately, there is a minor cost to that. The flip side is that what would happen, or how long would you be willing to let a matter go with partial payment or maybe lack of payment? Unfortunately, that does happen.
Absolutely. If you really think about it, if it's a check, and we've seen this quite often with our customers, is when they do get a check, and if it does bounce, then that's time and money that goes behind having to deal with that bounce check.
Exactly. Then you have to chase that client. You've already done the work. You've then chased the client for that payment, which can take days, weeks, hours of either your time or, if you're fortunate enough to have an assistant, their time, and it can be a very, very challenging process. With uLaw and our systems is that when somebody receives a matter and pays their invoice online, you will know right off the bat whether funds are available for them to actually pay, because the service then authorizes that transaction, so you know ahead of time whether this person has sufficient credit to pay that bill, because your main concern is that you want to get money and you want to get paid for the service that you are either going to render or have rendered. And that's you'll find automatically with the system, because it first does an authorization, then we capture the funds and deposit those funds into your bank account the next day.
Perfect. Do you have another question, if you want to take another question, Dan? So the question is, are there any limits on the number of transactions per month, and is there a cost associated with it?
There is no limit on the amount of transactions that you can conduct. So if you have one matter or 1,000 matters a month, or send out 1,000 invoices, you're fine. We do have internal controls of fraud filters, which more apply, say, in an e-commerce setting where you might have a link on your website, which we would then could enable, because if we're noticing all of a sudden a high velocity of charges going through, our systems might catch that and raise some red flags for us to investigate further. But if you're fortunate enough to send out 1,000 invoices or 1,000 matters a month, or even 10,000, you're great. There's no limit on that. There's also no limit on the dollars that you can transact. So once we know ahead of time, once we know the credit parameters ahead of time, we're going to underwrite you ahead of time so there's no issues going forward.
Well, that's a great advantage. That adds further to the value, because we do work with other partners. I have personally worked with other companies in my previous lives, where I've often seen that there is a price associated with transactions over and above a fee, over and above the international charges. Right? So that's pretty cool that you don't have a limit. Because we have varieties of customers, and if you look at legal professionals, and I'm sure you all agree, you have legal professionals that have multiple small claims matters in a month. There could be a lawyer who has just this 1 or 2 criminal law matters a month. And the cycles and the transactions could vary from volume to size to total money involved.
And that's actually one of the reasons why we've actually waived not only our setup fees but our monthly fees, because we want to help support you as a legal professional. Sometimes you could have a transaction a day. We've seen that. Sometimes, it's a transaction or a matter once every couple of weeks to a couple of months. So we wanted to support you in that as well.
Perfect. So from a record-keeping, bookkeeping, accounting perspective, I guess what it really means is the lawyer or the legal professional here gets one flat final service fee, let's say $300 plus tax, right? and then you do provide them with an online portal that outlines
Correct.
what
Correct.
added up for the $300. So they
Correct.
can internally reconcile that, but at the same time take that $300 number and enter it as an office expense, because that's an expense that the office does have to pay for to manage and run their business.
Correct.
Which then becomes part of uLaw's expenses, kind of keeps it easier for you to reconcile your general reconciliations of both money coming in and money leaving, right?
Correct.
One last question, and I hope I can segue from here to my demo, because we have another, well, we do have about half hour, so that should be okay. This is a question around the security, and maybe I can take this down real quick. There's two ways in how we've integrated with global payments. Now, global payments themselves are on a very secure cloud-based infrastructure, and so is uLaw. So we're 256-bit encrypted. We're password protected. We're also two-factor authentication protected. And how you initiate these transaction calls and the handshake between uLaw and global payments, and I'm sure I'll show it to you in a minute, but it happens through a secure channel. The handshake is also secure. There's tokenization, and we worked, Nathan and I is working with the global payments team behind the scene to make that handshake rather seamless, or I like the word frictionless.
Exactly. And as a payments acquirer, we're mandated, and we have to mandate that of our partners, that security is of utmost importance, because we cannot afford a data breach. Our partners cannot afford a data breach, and therefore our clients or merchants can't afford a data breach. So anytime that you do send out a matter, your clients will be directed to a secure URL, which is held behind our firewalls and our servers, that we store the card data. So you as a client, all you have to worry about is pretty much doing the legal work. We take care of storing that card data. That card data is tokenized. It's safe, it's secure, and it's not accessible by anybody else in your organization.
So in short, you're PCI compliance, and you take that headache off our clients.
Correct. So that is something that we worry about, and you don't have to. And for those of you that aren't familiar with PCI compliance stands for Payment Card Industry, and it's security requirements about what is required to physically handle cards either in a face-to-face transaction or in a card-not-present environment, which is what we're dealing in when you're sending out an invoice. So the short answer is that there's a whole bunch of rules and regulations about accepting credit cards. Seems like a hassle. Not really, because now you're not even touching that card data. You're through uLaw system, you're pushing that card data out. The client themselves is entering that card data into a secure system held behind our firewalls, and you get the advantage of getting paid the next day. Pretty simple.
That's great. So I'm going to try and take over the presenter role real quick.
And I now have uLaw support is now the presenter. And once I see your screen, Praveen, I'm then going to put myself back on mute. Thank you.
Okay. And in a minute, if this works right, you should see my agenda screen. We'll just give it a minute for the transfer over. There you go. I think you should see my agenda screen. Alrighty. So before I get set up and actually show you a live demo of the integration, I'll just set the context. In terms of everything that we just spoke about thus far, it's about, first and foremost, really demystifying the cost to the legal office with integrating, if you will, uLawPractice with global payments. And keep in mind, there's no cost that you pay for uLaw, because that integration is at no charge. Really, it's as and when you transact and accept payments from your customers, it's only then that those fees kick in, because Global Payments are offering any of the monthly fees off, at least for the first year, which makes it easier. Now, in terms of integrating Global Payments with uLaw itself, it's a fairly simple process. It's as easy as getting into your settings for those who are familiar with it already, and I'll walk you through this, and simply just choosing the Global Payments as the payment gateway that you want uLaw to be integrated. And as Dan briefly mentioned, they make it very simple and easy for you to connect through those two different void checks. They do make those connections with whichever financial institution you work with. Now, it could be a credit union, could be an RBC, BMO, TD, Scotiabank, CIBC, whatever may be the financial institution you're working with. Global Payments would recognize and work with you during that intake process and identify which one would be your trust account. In fact, we have customers that have a trust account with a certain institution. They actually have a general account with a different institution, and Global Payments have been able to accommodate that seamlessly in that situation as well. Now, once that setup is done, all that uLaw needs is the information that you are provided with from Global Payments, which is what is that account number for trust and the secret key that only you know, and similarly for general. And you enter that one time, and that's all we need, right? So I'm going to skip through these slides. Of course, I'll leave this slide even maybe after the demo. So you could certainly reach Dan or Daniel.Wolfson at globalpay.com. You can email us at info@uLawPractice.com or support@uLawPractice.com. So I'm going to shift gears from my presentation mode, and hopefully you're all able to see my screen where I actually have uLaw opened. I've got my fictitious legal professional, Roger Moore, utilizing uLaw for maybe the nth time this year for my demo. And I've taken the liberty of creating a client. I've gone through the client intake process, if you will, of adding this client, Mr. Chandler Bong. Of course, I'm a big Friends fan from the 90s, as you can see the sitcom. And, I've got some basic information. Of course, I could have done this right out of the uLaw phone app if you were meeting with Chandler at a courthouse and you didn't necessarily have your laptop there. So again, anytime, any device, it's a very seamless app experience for you to do that client intake. Of course, once you've done that client intake, you have to take a few steps to stay compliant with regards to ensuring that you've done the conflict screening for Chandler, right? Ensuring that there's no conflict in representing Chandler. More specific to today's webinar and the context of today's webinar, if I were to specifically focus on that integration and how that empowers you, the current users or potential new users, how it automatically just gives you this feature set of accepting credit cards for both trust and general, that's what I'm going to be kind of walking you through the next 10, 15 minutes, okay? So we spoke about almost the first step being integrating uLaw with Global Payments. So once you've got the information from Global Payments, you're going to introduce that information into uLaw. Because if you don't have that, I'm just going to walk you through what the experience is going to be without that integration, okay? Kind of the old school way. Now I've, again, taken the liberty of creating a matter. I've got a Chandler versus Janice. We all know Janice. And, maybe it's an issue with her laughter, and that's why Chandler's taken her to court, right? And if you're going to be accepting a retainer in uLaw, you can basically go ahead and click on the New Retainer tab and entering in the information. So this could be yourself in a sole practitioner office. This could be an assistant in a law firm. Notice that you do not see an option here to almost accept credit card information almost as a terminal. Because that's another cool thing, is with this integration, typically you're kind of, lack of a better term, not needing a system, if you will, a terminal to where you can slide in the card or chip the card to accept the payments, right? It is secure, equally secure, as if you were purchasing something on an Amazon website. It almost becomes now your e-commerce store where you accept payments from your customers. So you do not see that option because you don't have that integrated payment. So you could still, if you're doing the old school way, you're maybe accepting it through a terminal, paying terminal fees, and then once you've paid, you tell us what that reference number is. All of that data entry still happens. But now let me show you the experience of what it is to accept that, integrate with global payments. So the first steps you would take is go under Settings here in the top right corner, and you have multiple tabs to deal with because of course, this is where you personalize the uLaw experience. And once you enter the Accounts tab, we have this particular line item called Payment Collection. Now, by default, this is set to none. Let me see if I can annotate this real quick. Yep, there you go. So you set this to Payment Collection as none. And we're going to choose Global Payments. Of course, I'm using the test account for the purposes of today's demo. In the real-life scenario, in your own account, you would choose Global Payments and not the test account. Again, jokes apart, I've tried this, doesn't work. So just saving you some grace. So once you do enter Global Payments as your payment collection gateway, of course, you would have to enter the terminal ID that Global Payments has provided you with for both the Trust and General. If you're only dealing with General, then it would only be General, right? And they will give you the secret key or HPP key, they call it, that you need to enter. And you save that information. Now that's really all you have to do to integrate uLaw with global payments. Of course, the next step to do is to test it, is to make sure that integration works. Now, how does that integration work? We've actually aligned that integration right within almost a day-to-day workflow that you would take within uLaw, a life in uLaw, right? A day that the transactions have to deal with. So you create a client, you would create a matter, and right within the workflow where you accept a new retainer into uLaw, enter the amount, tell us when you receive that. Now you see this new blue button, which is Payment Collection. It tells you what the terminal ID you're dealing with because, again, this is a retainer, okay? The money technically being deposited into your TD Trust account. And Global Payments would have made that behind-the-scene connection already. So when you enter this amount, we know automatically the terminal ID that's being dealt with is connected to your Trust account and the order ID. You validate that, and when you're ready, you collect the payment. And how do you do that? Right here within uLaw, right within that HTTPS secured connection, this is a scenario where either the customer is in the office or you're collecting this information on phone, right? We prefer that it's in person or phone. Again, these are different channels that are available today. Now, one of Dan's point is about that declined check. So let's say I've got this example. I'm going to go ahead and provide a credit card that's expired. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and type the name, basic information that you would capture, right? So you're going to try and process that transaction. No thanks. Right away, your assistant or yourself, whoever is dealing with that transaction, right away understands that this is declined. So there's, again, you can create a retainer receipt. You don't have to. you're basically going to just politely let the customer know, Mr. Chandler, saying, hey, not sure what happened, but that particular card just got declined, buddy. So can you maybe help me with another card? Chandler's like, oh yeah, crap, sorry. Yeah, that was an older card. Let me get this new payment card. Maybe I'll try my MasterCard. And now you have a new MasterCard to deal with. And of course, as Dan mentioned, there are many different cards that they facilitate payment for. This is a great segue for a story. A current legal professional client that we work with that deals with a lot of immigration clients, she had this situation where she utilized this particular service of integrating with global payments to facilitate credit card payments from overseas for helping with immigration clients. Right? It's a fantastic service. It works and also facilitates in a very timely manner those benefits. And one benefit right away is ensuring that you're informed about credit cards that have declined. Just going to go ahead and type the information in. Now if I accept that payment, it's going to say processing. It's connecting in real time with the global payments gateway. And now you can see the response is authorized. And further, once it's authorized, you can see there's a unique reference. Of course, this is a test data, but in real life too, when you do use the global payments integration, you are going to get a unique reference number for that payment. Now that is very important, of course, for you to enter for ledgering that information into uLaw. And what we've done is we've kind of made it simpler, where you can basically just copy this line item in green, mark this as a credit card payment, and just paste that right here within the reference. Provide the customer a retainer receipt for that $1,000. And you're pretty much done. Now, behind the scene, of course, Global Payments would have deposited that $1,000 into your trust account. And again, they're not going to just transact another 30 right off your general account. They're calculating all those transactions and sending you one bill for you to pay. Right? So here's the retainer receipt with all the pertinent information. It has the credit card order ID, the unique reference number, and you can just email this to your client. So this is one use case where a client is either in person or is on the phone. It's not a self-serve. So they basically gave you that information and you've entered it. Now, let's look at the second use case where Dan mentioned about this, and this is one of the most widely used feature that we have today within our customers using this integrated payment. Now, this could be for a matter that has a retainer involved. This could be for a matter where no retainer was involved. So just for the purpose of today's demo, I'm just going to go ahead and say initial client meeting. I'm going to flip this into a billable hour. So I spent 2 hours. I'm going to add another docket, court visit, and I'm going to say, here's another $200. Initial client meeting. Okay. Of course, as soon as I save that information, it's about $800 plus about $200, $1,000 plus taxes. You're going to see the projected balance go over that initial $1,000 retainer that we just received. Okay? So what that really means is that the customer either owes you a top-up of a retainer, or you need that $130 made as a payment. Let's assume it's the latter, that it's actually a $130 payment, and you've completed the work. Now your time is right to generate that invoice. Of course, you can generate a pre-bill. A pre-bill, of course, does not generate an invoice number. It is for your eyes only. So again, this is a default theme, so it can have your own letterhead, your logo. Clearly tells you the amount due is $130. Basically tells you the dockets, the $400, the 2 hours, the flat rate docket, before taxes, total amount. It also tells you that you received a retainer for $1,000 on the 20th. Okay? And last but not the least, it tells you that that's the amount due. Now, typically a pre-bill would have a watermark which says preview. Of course, the settings, someone's removed that. You can always put that back in. The important point to note is that there is no invoice number. So this is for your eyes only, ensuring that you've got every piece of information validated. This could be your assistant sending it to you via email for your approval. This could be your self-approval, whatever the situation is. Once you're ready to generate that invoice, you're going to go ahead and hit the complete button. And let's maybe choose the fall. Are we in fall already? Oh, crap. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and generate an invoice. And this is where the magic happens. There is, because of that integration between uLaw and Global Payments, and Global Payments does facilitate this, a secure way for you to accept payments and facilitate that further as a self-serve. And we took advantage of that and, as I said, worked relentlessly to integrate it into uLaw to give that added functionality. So now when you generate an invoice, especially if there's money owing, what we do is we take the liberty of embedding. It's the same invoice. Notice that there's actually an invoice number. So if you looked at the pre-bill, it was just no invoice number. You know, with the fall view, you're going to see that magic happen right here. But that's the fall thing. It's the same piece of information. Imagine you emailing this to Mr. Chandler Bong, and he gets this invoice. He reviews it, and in a very subtle, professional way, you're basically giving him the option for Mr. Chandler to pay for this amount due at his own leisure. He could be using a mobile phone, viewing this email, would still work. He would click on that link, and you can see this is, of course, a test, and hence it's going to a test site, but it's still encrypted and it's secure. And now Chandler, I've got another example of a Visa. So I've done an American Express, or actually I've done a couple of Visas, but they accept American Express too. So I'm just going to go ahead and accept that card number. Now Chandler could be entering this information at his own platform. You know, maybe he's in the beaches in Florida, and he's just paying for using his credit card. He doesn't have to come in person. There's no debit card involved. He's not emailing you a check. And of course, he's not available to speak to you because he's holidaying in Florida, or even better, in Hawaii. Right? But he got the email. He appreciates your business, that the services that you rendered, and he understands he has committed to making that payment, because of course that's part of your retainer letter, right? So he's not doing anyone a favor, but he's probably taking advantage of this feature and paying you faster than having to deal with other modes of payment, right? So that's where the ease and the response time of that accounts receivable comes into play. So when Chandler goes ahead and clicks on Pay Now, behind the scene, Global Payment would accept that $130. So you can see the amount. That keeps you compliant too. So Chandler is not paying you for anything over and above the amount due, right? So he can just randomly transact $300 because that would not reconcile. And that question is not really a uLaw thing. It's more of a Chrome thing. So you can turn it off in your Chrome settings. That's the browser I'm using. So it tells them clearly, hey, it's authorized. It's done. And here's the unique reference number. Now, even better. As soon as that payment is done, let's say you're in the Alps and you're using uLaw in the Alps. Well, if you do, please let us know because that would be a great story to tell. But you would then receive this notification from uLaw. It says, you generated an invoice. That was the invoice number, or maybe somebody in the office did. That's the amount Chandler owes. Okay? Perfect. Now you're expecting for Chandler to pay. But you didn't expect him to pay you that fast. You've got it right away. You get another email which says, oh, you know what? He got the email and he's paid you for it. And how do you know that it's for Chandler? We tell you that. We tell you that it was for the matter. It's not just the customer. We tell you the matter for which this payment was made and the amount. And just like the previous transaction, all you need to do is tell uLaw that happened. Of course, you probably asked the question, why can't just uLaw automatically ledger that? And we're bringing it because there's a little bit more security concerns with regard to automatic ledgering. We hope to bring that feature as well as a configurable option, so you can decide whether you want that or not, hopefully by end of this year. So here it is, the $130 that you just received. You got it through credit card. I've already got it. I've got it. Goes into my general account. Very important, you give Mr. Chandler the receipt. So you're in the Alps with your Airbnb Wi-Fi on it, and you're doing this real quick. Chandler has paid for the $130, and what is he waiting for? He's waiting for a receipt that everything is done right. So you're going to download that receipt right away from uLaw. Because he was prompt in doing what he had to do. Maybe you want to be prompt in what you have to do. And here's that payment receipt, where you say, thank you so much for the payment of the $130, Mr. Chandler. You sign and send it back to him. Now, of course, if you have electronic signature, you can drag and drop that electronic signature right under Roger Moore. Okay? Now, for $1,000 that was already in the trust account, you're now going to transfer that from trust to general. Of course, that is something you would do using electronic banking or other means. Remember the $1,000 that Global Payments deposited into your trust account? Through that invoice, you have now earned that money and enabled you to transfer that money from the trust account into the general account. Because only when you do that can you actually earn that money for your firm. Because if the money is sitting in the trust account, it is waiting for it to be converted into earned money. Right? So here's that $1,130 invoice. Now note, because we only got $1,000 into a retainer, that's the only amount that we allow you to transfer over. Again, keeping you compliant. So this moves from your trust account into your general account. And of course, if it's the province of Ontario, we also help you fill out the Form 9A. So you would do this transfer with your TD bank, tell us what that reference number was once the transfer is done, and then we would then give you this wonderful Form 9A for you to sign out. And you can do this in the Alps as well. Of course, you've emailed Chandler that receipt, and he's happy, and he's on a boat ride. As simple and straightforward as that. So typically, what we've seen is, as interesting as this integration may seem, there is, of course, a lot of work that goes behind the scene with regards to security, compliance, as well as ease of facilitating the service. And at the end of the month, when you get that bill from Global Payments, which you're really happy about, of course, you can go ahead and create a new expense account under your office expenses. And you can call it Global Payments Credit Card Fees. Right? And this is something that they facilitate. Otherwise, you would have to reconcile almost every account. And end of the month, or whenever you get the bill, you're basically going to either manually enter it, or you can actually import your TD bank statement, which would have a $300 withdrawal from Global Payments. And you would just tell us the date, the pre-or tag, paid to Global Payments, coming out of your general account, of course. And this would, of course, be a direct withdrawal. Now, would that be correct, Dan? That would be a direct withdrawal from the general account that they send you the white check for, correct?
Correct.
They would give you a correspondence number, and you're done. So not only does it make data entry easy, it makes the financial transaction easier. But Global Payments also goes one step further to make your general reconciliation and your office expenses data entry a lot easier. Okay? So when it's time to reconcile, if you're doing, let's say, your general reconciliation in uLaw, you're just going to see that one line item in your TD bank which says September monthly charges. Of course, we want to say Global Payments or something like that. And that's the $339. It's easier for you to check off. Okay? So one simple line item for your expenses. Of course, if you have multiple retainers, which you will certainly have, you would see multiple deposits. And here it is, the retainer for Mr. Chandler Bong of $1,000. Checked. Making reconciliation easier as well. Okay? And I know I've gone about 5 minutes about our scheduled time. So again, once again, thanks to everyone who joined us today. I once again want to thank Global Payments, and specifically Dan, for participating and helping and clarifying in such detail about what Global Payments has to offer, the integration with uLaw, and the great work you're doing with legal professionals in Canada. If you have further questions regarding this webinar or the integration, or whether it's regarding global payments, please feel free to email us, and we'll be more than happy to put you in touch with Dan. I do have his email address right here if you'd like to note it down. Of course, this webinar is being recorded and will be available for you to review next week as early as Monday. So with that, if there aren't any more questions, at least for today, I would like to wrap up this webinar. Once again, thank you, Dan.
Praveen, thank you very much. Thank you for the audience who is listening. Again, I do want to make sure that we can address any questions and concerns. So if you do have any questions or concerns, or would like a little deeper dive into what we talked about today, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Have yourself a fantastic weekend ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.